As winter gripped the Iowa countryside in late 1944, heavy snows blanketed the fields, turning the daily grind of farm work into a slower rhythm of indoor chores and quiet reflection. The German prisoners, including young Klaus Becker, spent more time in the barn loft, mending tools, sorting seeds for spring planting, or simply staring out at the white expanse that reminded some of the harsh Russian steppes they'd escaped. But for Klaus, the cold brought a different kind of warmth, one born from the unexpected bonds forming on the Kraus farm and beyond. Helen Kraus's secret acts of kindness had evolved into something deeper. No longer just sneaking food under the cover of night, she now openly shared meals when the guards were distant, teaching Klaus English phrases over steaming bowls of potato soup thickened with precious cream from their dairy herd. In return, through Ernst's translations, Klaus described his life in Munich, the bustling markets before the bombs came, the Hitler Youth rallies that once filled him with misguided pride, and the gnawing fear as Allied planes darkened the skies. These conversations peeled back layers of propaganda on both sides. Helen, who'd absorbed years of newsreels portraying Germans as ruthless invaders, began to see the human cost of total war. Klaus, indoctrinated to view Americans as decadent gangsters, discovered a family rooted in hard work, faith, and quiet generosity. This shift wasn't isolated to the Kraus farm. Across Black Hawk County and the broader Midwest, similar stories unfolded in branch camps tied to larger facilities like Camp Algona, some 90 miles northwest, which housed thousands of German POWs and dispatched work details to surrounding farms. The U.S. Army's prisoner labor program, expanded dramatically by 1944, addressed acute shortages as American men fought overseas. Prisoners earned scrip for canteen purchases, while farmers paid the government per hour worked. Guards enforced separation, but in rural settings, enforcement was pragmatic. Many supervisors, veterans themselves, recognized that humane treatment boosted productivity and morale, and mirrored the Geneva standards America upheld, in stark contrast to reports trickling in about Axis camps. Community attitudes varied, shaped by personal losses and ethnic ties. Cedar Falls, with its strong German-American heritage, many families descended from 19th-century immigrants from Bavaria and Prussia, felt a cultural pull. Church services in German lingered in memory, and folks spoke dialects at home. When POW details arrived, conversations in the native tongue bridged gaps. One neighbor, recalling harvest help, noted how a prisoner's lullaby in German evoked childhood songs. But not all welcomed it. Families with sons in uniform, especially those grieving Pacific casualties against the Japanese, saw any softness as near treason. Anonymous complaints reached camp commanders, echoing War Department bans on fraternization to avoid espionage risks or ideological contamination. Yet, compassion often won out, especially toward the younger prisoners. By late 1944, as Germany's defenses crumbled, captures included increasing numbers of adolescents from Volkssturm units and depleted Wehrmacht formations. Though the youngest sent to U.S. camps were typically mid-teens or older, boys under 16 often segregated or handled differently in Europe. Many appeared shockingly youthful, underfed, and shell-shocked. Farm families, raising their own teenagers, couldn't ignore it. Women like Helen organized subtle aid networks, extra pies accidentally baked, mittens knitted in neutral colors and passed via guards, books from local libraries left in barns. These weren't grand gestures but accumulated mercies that restored dignity. Thanksgiving in November 1944 marked a turning point on the Kraus place. Traditionally a harvest celebration, it fell amid rationing. Turkey was scarce, sugar points precious. Helen stretched ingredients for a modest spread: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes from their root cellar, pumpkin pie sweetened with corn syrup. Frank, initially reserved, agreed to include the workers for a midday meal in the farmhouse kitchen, a bold step skirting rules. The prisoners filed in hesitantly, removing caps, eyes wide at the laden table. Klaus sat wide-eyed as Helen passed platters, explaining the holiday's pilgrim roots. Ernst translated grace, and for a moment, the room filled with awkward silence broken by forks clinking and murmurs of appreciation. One older prisoner, a former baker from Hamburg, complimented the pie in halting English, drawing laughs. Frank, observing Klaus devour seconds, grunted approval, a rare crack in his stoic facade. As December approached, whispers of Christmas plans spread. Official policy allowed no special provisions for enemy prisoners. Holidays were just another workday to prevent favoritism or unrest. But in Cedar Falls, a coalition of farm wives, coordinated through church circles and backfence chats, plotted otherwise. Helen took the lead, rallying contributions. Margaret Olson donated a ham cured in her smokehouse. Louise Hogan baked stollen using a family recipe reminiscent of German traditions. Others added cookies, candles, and hand-carved ornaments. Someone felled a small cedar from a fence row for a tree. The venue, a large community barn on neutral ground, cleared for the occasion. On Christmas Eve, under a canopy of stars and light snow flurries, the prisoners were escorted, not marched, to the gathering. Guards positioned discreetly outside, Captain Reeves among them, chose discretion over disruption. Inside, lanterns glowed, a stove crackled with cedar logs, and the air carried scents of pine, spiced cider, and roasting meat. Tables groaned under potluck bounty, turkeys from combined rations, stuffing with garden herbs, cranberry sauce traded from town stores. The men entered tentatively, uniforms brushed clean, faces shaved. Klaus paused at the threshold, inhaling deeply, memories of pre-war Christmases in Munich flooding back, candlelit trees, his mother's Lebkuchen, carols around the family table. The evening unfolded magically. Language barriers dissolved in shared songs, American hymns like Silent Night, recognized in its original German, Still Nacht, sung alternately in both tongues. One prisoner pulled a harmonica from his pocket, playing folk melodies that prompted others to join. Laughter echoed as stories swapped, POWs recounting Black Forest holidays, farmers sharing Iowa sledding tales. Klaus, emboldened, sketched quick portraits on scrap paper, Helen's likeness capturing her kind eyes, earning applause. Tears flowed freely, not from sorrow alone but overwhelming relief. Otto Schneider, a grizzled veteran from the African campaign, wept openly, whispering thanks for reminding him of lost humanity. Captain Reeves, arriving midway, surveyed the scene. Protocol screamed intervention. Fraternization on this scale could warrant reports up the chain. But witnessing the joy, the absence of propaganda or malice, he stayed. Accepting a plate, he sat among them, sharing tobacco and war anecdotes minus the bitterness. Later, questioned by a subordinate, he shrugged, "This is what we're fighting for, decency prevailing." For Klaus, the night etched eternally. Helen gifted him a knitted scarf in blue wool, tucked with a family photo. In return, he presented a small carving, a dove whittled from barn wood during idle hours. "For peace," he said in improving English. She hugged him briefly, maternal instinct overriding rules, as Frank looked on approvingly. January 1945 brought deeper snows and grim war news. The Battle of the Bulge raging in Belgium, Hitler's last desperate offensive stalling Allied advances. Radios in farmhouses crackled with updates, American casualties mounting, towns like Bastogne besieged. Tension rippled through communities, some demanded tighter POW restrictions. But on the farms, bonds held. Women continued visits, bringing books on American history to counter Nazi ideology, playing checkers or cards during breaks. Klaus thrived visibly, gaining weight, his cheeks filling, nightmares fading. He mastered chores, feeding livestock, repairing harnesses, even joking in broken English. Ernst facilitated letter writing, penning Klaus's words to his mother, descriptions of plentiful food, kind treatment, safety far from bombs. Via Red Cross channels, messages traversed oceans slowly. Replies, when they came, expressed profound gratitude, Anna Becker blessing the American angels, safeguarding her son. As spring hinted in melting drifts, the war's end loomed. Reports of Soviet advances eastward, Allied crossings into Germany proper. Prisoners listened intently to broadcasts, emotions mixed, relief at survival, anxiety over homeland devastation. Klaus confided fears to Helen, what awaited in ruined Munich. She promised support, whatever came. This Iowa interlude, repeated in varied forms across the Midwest, revealed war's profound irony. Enemies, thrust together by necessity, rediscovering shared humanity. Farm families didn't excuse the Reich's crimes. Emerging horrors of liberated camps like Dachau in early 1945 hardened resolve, but distinguished soldiers from regime. In treating prisoners with fairness, they upheld American ideals, proving compassion a quiet weapon against hatred spread. The story's climax approached with Europe's surrender, but these winter months forged legacies enduring decades, friendships transcending uniforms, lessons in mercy amid madness. What happened next would test those bonds as peace dawned and repatriation beckoned. As spring thawed the Iowa soil in 1945, the rhythm of life on farms like the Crosses shifted from survival to anticipation. Plows turned the rich black earth for corn and soybeans, while radios brought daily updates of Allied advances deep into Germany. The Ardennes offensive had collapsed, Soviet forces encircled Berlin, and American troops liberated concentration camps, revealing horrors that hardened hearts even as victory neared. For the German prisoners scattered across the Midwest, news stirred complex emotions, relief at the war's impending end mixed with dread for devastated homelands and uncertain futures. Klaus Becker, now stronger and more confident after months of steady meals and purposeful work, listened intently to these broadcasts alongside the older men. His English had improved remarkably. Conversations with Helen flowed easily, laced with laughter over shared chores or stories of pre-war life. He spoke of dreams deferred, sketching Bavarian landscapes, perhaps studying art one day. Helen encouraged him, sharing books from the Cedar Falls Library on American history and democracy, part of a broader quiet effort in many camps to expose prisoners to ideas countering years of indoctrination. Through Ernst's guidance, Klaus penned more letters home, describing blooming fields, the kindness of strangers, and hope that his mother and sister had survived the bombings. April brought pivotal moments. On the 12th, President Roosevelt's death stunned the nation. Flags flew at half-mast, and even the prisoners paused in respect, aware of his role in the alliance against their former leader. Then, on April 30th, reports confirmed Adolf Hitler's suicide in his Berlin bunker. The barn loft fell silent as the men gathered around the radio. Some crossed themselves, others stared blankly. Loyalty to the regime had eroded long ago for most, replaced by exhaustion and regret. Klaus turned to Helen, who had joined them that evening, and said softly, "It is finished." She nodded, squeezing his hand, knowing the real end was near. May 8, 1945, Victory in Europe Day, erupted in celebration across America. Church bells pealed in Cedar Falls, parades formed downtown, families danced in streets adorned with bunting. But on the farms, the mood was bittersweet. Prisoners like Klaus packed meager belongings, a few clothes, canteen script savings, small carvings or drawings made during winter evenings. Goodbyes were emotional. Helen organized a final gathering, not as grand as Christmas but heartfelt. Picnic tables under budding oaks, with fried chicken, fresh bread, and apple pie. Guards looked away as embraces crossed lines once strictly enforced. Klaus gifted Helen another carving, a simple heart-shaped locket from scrap wood, inscribed with, "Danke, Mutti." Tears flowed freely as he whispered promises to write. Repatriation unfolded methodically over months. The U.S. Army, adhering to Geneva protocols but facing logistical challenges in war-ravaged Europe, prioritized processing. Prisoners from branch camps like those near Cedar Falls transferred to larger bases for interviews, health checks, and denazi screening. Klaus moved first to a consolidation point, then eastward. By summer, ships carried thousands homeward, reverse voyages across the Atlantic, now under peacetime skies. Delays mounted, ports overwhelmed, Europe in chaos with displaced millions. Some POWs assisted Allied occupation forces briefly, clearing rubble or harvesting in Britain and France to earn passage. Klaus arrived in Munich late in 1945, stepping into a city of skeletal buildings and ration lines. His family home reduced to ruins, he located his mother Anna in a displaced persons camp, thin but alive, his sister Greta beside her. Their reunion was overwhelming. Embraces amid tears, Klaus's filled-out frame and fluent English tales of Iowa astonishing them. He shared Helen's address, photos of the farm, and stories of warmth that sustained him. Anna wept reading preserved letters, blessing the American woman who had mothered her son from afar. Life rebuilt slowly in occupied Germany. Klaus apprenticed as a carpenter, marrying in the 1950s, raising children who heard endless tales of the American Mutti. Correspondence with Helen endured, annual letters detailing harvests, grandchildren, rebuilt lives. She sent care packages, coffee, fabrics, During harsh post-war years, he replied with carvings, news of recovery. Similar bonds formed elsewhere in the Midwest. In camps like Algona, where thousands passed through branch farms, prisoners created lasting artifacts. Intricate nativity scenes displayed annually, symbols of peace crafted in captivity. Many former POWs returned as visitors or immigrants, settling near old work sites, marrying locals, becoming citizens. Communities welcomed them, proof that shared labor and kindness bridged divides. Decades passed. The Kraus farm changed hands, subdivided for modern homes, but the barn stood resilient. In the 1990s, a historical marker erected nearby commemorated the site, not for battles, but compassion, where farm families saw humanity in the enemy, offering food, shelter, and hope to young men far from home. Helen passed in the 1980s, her funeral attended by distant correspondents. Klaus, living into the new millennium, visited Iowa multiple times, standing before that barn, tracing memories of warm milk and quilts. This chapter from America's heartland, echoed in states like Kansas, Nebraska, and Minnesota, reveals war's profound paradox. While armies clashed overseas, necessity brought captors and captives together on quiet fields. Strict rules bent under maternal instincts and Midwestern decency, extra bread left anonymously, socks knitted in secret, holidays shared defying orders. Not every interaction was warm. Some communities shunned, losses fueled resentment. Yet thousands of stories emerged of transformed perspectives. Prisoners exposed to fair treatment questioning propaganda, Americans distinguishing regime from individuals. In treating over 400,000 German POWs humanely, better fed often than European civilians, the U.S. upheld ideals worth fighting for. Many prisoners returned home advocates for democracy, contributing to Germany's rebirth. Lifelong friendships proved hatred not inevitable. A boy soldier, spared the front's full brutality, found redemption in a stranger's mercy. Today, museums preserve these legacies, nativities carved by skilled hands, letters archived, oral histories shared. They remind us that even in history's darkest eras, light persists through ordinary courage. Farm women like Helen didn't seek glory. They heard a child's cry and responded. In baking bread for the enemy, knitting for boys in threadbare uniforms, they waged peace. Klaus's final visit, elderly but vigorous, brought his grandchildren to the marker. He spoke of smells, fresh hay, roasting turkey, safety. "I held a rifle once," he said, "forced into a war not mine. Then I held a quilt, offered by a mother across oceans. She gave me back my childhood, if only briefly." That, he insisted, was America's true victory, not tanks rolling into Berlin, but hearts opening in Iowa barns. This story endures because it transcends winners and losers. It affirms that compassion outlives conflict, humanity defies uniforms. In a world still scarred by division, these quiet acts from 1944 to 1945 whisper timeless truth. Kindness crosses battle lines, mothers recognize shared pain, and one cup of warm milk can heal wounds deeper than bullets. The war ended empires, but mercy built bridges lasting generations. From Cedar Falls fields rose proof that love, stubbornly offered, conquers fear, and in choosing decency amid madness, we all win.